Hi, if you're a company that runs SAP and you're using SAP for all your back office, financials, logistics, and so forth, so you're running some version of R3, EC6, or on some level of enhancement pack, and you're wondering, what's the future of your ECC environment going to be? In other words, what are you going to do? You're going to move to S4 at HANA. At what point you're going to move? You're obviously getting pressure from SAP. You're probably getting pressure from SIs as well to start the implementation. You may be getting pressure internally from your internal staff, your support staff. It could be from your business as well. But what you are doing is you're finding is a lot of companies are pressuring you to try and make that move, to make that move step forward, whether it's just to start off with HANA or move on to a version of HANA or a piece of HANA in terms of just moving forward with it. There is that pressure that you're getting. On the other hand, you're getting cost pressures and the idea of increasing cost or a large implementation cost is something you as a company cannot really absorb. And then lastly, if you've got past all of that, you got the question of how do I make a business case? How do I prove a return on investment? How can I take this money and say that the amount that I'm going to spend through the implementation, the new infrastructure cost, the new support cost beyond that, and then the new licensing cost is actually going to make sense for me? So if you're a customer running SAP, then you're probably that person sitting right in the middle of that intersection, trying to navigate what is your next steps. The good news is my name is Sean Duplessis. I run the SAP practice for Spinnaker Support, doing this on 14 years, 10 years now with Spinnaker, and I've been in SAP pretty much my whole career, going back 30 years already, doing everything from implementations, helping customers with, managed service structures, helping customers with, changing or building out or implementing SAP software in many different forms. So what I'd like to do is today is sort of take you through some information that you can find on the web. It's publicly available. It's credited information by folks that do this for a living, and sort of give you a sense of what are all customers doing, what are they all thinking, and what are the things that you may have as choices, and how should you think about it? Well, yes, Derek Pryor, he used to be an analyst for Gartner in the space of ERP, and essentially he did a survey with 48 people in a UK user group. As you can see on this survey, it's very similar to when you see surveys across the world in terms of, how companies are thinking about their SAP space. And basically, he asked the customers a handful of questions with the idea to get a sense of how they're thinking of the next step for ERP, why would they make that choice, and would they be able to logically make that happen? So this first question it came is basically asking the 48 surveyed folks the question of where are they on their roadmap? How do they feel about it? Do they feel like they know what it is? Do they feel comfortable about what the next step's going to be for it? And what you can see is only a small percentage, 21% said, we've worked it out. We think we know exactly what it is. The remaining 79% were not clear about it or didn't have a real good sense of what it would be. So what you can see is the majority of the customers, almost 80% of the customers that are running ECC have no idea or are not in a position to state what they think the next step for their ECC environment is. The next set of questions was more around the question of value. In other words, if you're going to make a choice to go to S4HANA, or if you're considering going to S4HANA, why are you choosing? So the first question that came out there is how important would it be if the move to S4 aligned with their business? And you can see 52% said it's very important in terms of that. The next question is, well, with S4 and S4 simplified and running on HANA, there's obviously a faster system, more performance driven on the system side. And the question is, how important would that be to customers? 23% said it would be important. Then the last question came down to, does the maintenance end date play a role in them making a decision? How important is that? And 69% of the surveys basically said that would be the importance to them. 69% said that would be probably the most important thing. So as you can imagine, almost 70% of these customers are basically saying we're going to make a move possibly one day, and it will be due to the SAP mainstream end date. Well, SAP knows that as well, and SAP understands that. That's the reason they put that date out there. The last question that came in terms of, once you get through all of that, would you likely get approval? Would you be able to get the funding, charter a project, put all your other projects on hold and go through an exercise of actually implementing S4? Well, out of the surveys, less than one third of one third of the customers actually said they believe they will get approval. In other words, 60+% of the customers basically said they don't believe they'd be able to, first of all, get the funding for such a large undertaking, and secondly, be able to justify the spend. So what you can see is a lot of customers, they don't know what the SAP roadmap looks like. If they're going to make a decision, it's purely driven off the fact that end of life for ECC, and then lastly, they're not even sure they would be able to get the funding to do the project. The next slide, really what I wanted to present here is this is an updated slide version. Gartner presents it every year, but the reality is if you look at how many customers are actually at this point over the last several quarters, years, have made a decision to actually acquire SAP S/4HANA licenses and actually made a move. And what you notice in terms of 70% of the 40,000 plus customers have not purchased any S4 software, any S4 licensing. That sort of aligns with the prior survey, basically stating that, we're not at a point where we make a decision to actually start it or acquire it or even move forward with it. So that's a whole undertaking that they would have to take. But what the customers that have decided that they would acquire it, some have acquired some pieces of it, certain like HANA database, and then some may be considering installing a BW on HANA, CRM on HANA in areas like that. But very few have actually made the leap of faith to move their ECC environment, the most critical system, into the S4 arena. There is companies that have done it. They do it for some smaller systems and more standalone systems, more vanilla implementations, approaches, and they've been able to do it that way. But what you get a sense of is customers are still getting their feet wet. They haven't made a decision to full swing into the S4 arena. So what's the next key piece as we consider this? I get a lot of questions from customers, in terms of my customer base, our customer base, when are they moving, what they're moving. And what I always say to customers is until you've gone through an exercise where you've actually sort of laid it out of what it would look like to actually do an implementation. What's the licensing going to look like? What's the infrastructure going to look like? What's the support organization for your ECC and for the future system? Where are you going to get the exercise or consultants? Are you going to sign up with Rise with SAP and believe that SAP is going to give you the best deal and going to give you the best set of resources to get it done? Well, here's a really good example of it. And I've taken a very conservative approach here. You can probably find many of these types of examples available on the web. Taking the idea that most customers consider a move to S4 more of a brownfield approach. In other words, they're not going to want to go and redo all the processes. They're not going to want to redesign the system. They probably maybe not even implement some of the functionality that may be additional with the S4 implementation. So what you see them saying is, I've got an ECC environment. I'm running financials, logistics, and certain of the models. If you take that for the approach that all ECC customers have, some have more extended versions of that, some have less, some have more custom code, some have less. But let's just take and say, hey, not a heavy customized environment, standard functionality in ECC. You're typically going to require about 15, 16, maybe even more consultants. Imagine this from BW, not from BW, from business development, ABAP development perspective, from basis administration, from all the functional folks across the space. So now you're looking at a consulting team of about 15 consultants, a minimum of 9 months, which gives you about 1,500 something hours. If you take that and you equate what that is, that gives you a cost of about $3.7 million to implement. So that's a pretty significant cost. Once you get a feeling of that, it's going to give you a good sense whether that's, as a company, you would be able to complete that. So that does not include reskilling your current teams, your new infrastructure costs that come with a new platform, the licensing that would come with us, knowing that you'd be moving more away from an on-premise perpetual type license more to a subscription-based, and also knowing that SAP is projecting that they're going to increase their revenue by by 30%, knowing that that's probably coming from you. So from SAP's perspective, you're never going to pay less, you're only going to pay more. So important to you on this one. This is a good example. So if you've had a number in your mind, you can probably bounce it against this, but this is the type of number that you may be looking at. So what does this mean to the complete SAP customer base? Assuming SAP has 40,000 ECC customers, what they publish and what other companies publish as well. Well, if you take that 40,000 SAP customers, every one of them going to run 9 months purely for ECC. Forget it. I'm not talking about CRM and BW and all the other business suite applications purely for ECC. And then I'm talking 15 consultants. That's very conservative. It's probably more than that, given the larger companies and the long global prints. We're talking about 108 million days of consulting. And that has to happen within the next 5 years. So 100 billion worth of consulting cost, essentially 108 million man days. You can imagine that's quite a stretch for any sizable organization. So SAP has put together SAP Rise with SAP with the intent to hopefully get customers to plug in and make this happen. But the question you have to ask yourself, is that really possible? Is it really possible that all of the customer base is going to move through in the next 5 years and that the resources will be there and that you will get the best price for the implementation? Well, I think it's pretty much a stretch to say that that would be true. So as we move on, the next slide, really, we talk about mainstream end date, mainstream support end date, R3 and ECC, well, ECC version, it's got a 2027 end date, which is the most current end date. Traditionally, SAP has changed this as, I think it's more a situation where the customer base has control of the end date versus SAP. As a good example, if 70% of the customers have not made the move yet, that means 70% of them are sitting on the line waiting. That means they're paying support, and that support is extremely profitable for SAP because SAP considers support already a baked process, which means they've delivered that. They would like to move on to S4 now. So if you've got such a large customer base providing such a big revenue stream for SAP, do you really believe that SAP is going to say to them, sorry, you're not going to get any further support, and they will turn away that money? Well, it's hard to believe that would even be possible. So the question is that date real? I expect the date's going to run 20, 30, 35 plus, because at the end of the day, until customers feel that moving to S4 is the right thing and they can stomach the amount of cost and implications of it, and that there's a critical mass that SAP customers can make, I believe that date will continue to move. I think Darren Roos positioned it first. Well, extending the support to 2027 may give the customers the illusion he's addressing their concerns. It does help them. It doesn't help them. It only delays the problem. That is true. It doesn't matter whether it's 5 years out or 8 years out or 10 years out. You're still sitting with the same issue. And then even with the 2-year extension, there simply aren't the skills and resources available to migrate everyone by the deadline. For many customers, there still isn't real quantifiable value in moving to S4. And so these are challenges that SAP has not been able to overcome. And therefore, their customer base is not following the same path as what SAP would like them to. So once we think through all of that, the question is, what are the options you have as a customer? And I'm going to start right at the top right-hand corner. This graph is really meant to indicate the longer you take, the less disruption and less risk you will have. And the earlier you make a decision, the more significant the cost would be on that. So the strategic adoption here is the idea that if you have a full SAP footprint, which means you're running SAP Business Suite, you're running a lot of the peripheral products around it, you have all the integration technologies, you're running all the reporting technologies, that you may take a choice and say, well, I'm going to move all of this to an SAP footprint in a newer version, whether it's in cloud, whether S4, C4, and so forth. But the idea is taking an approach that you'd move that. In the old days, when everybody moved to R3, they did take somewhat of a big bang approach to move to R3, but then started to layer in the other SAP products. Would that be the strategy you would take? Well, if you're going to be doing that and you're going to make that decision right now, obviously you would have to negotiate your licensing strategy with SAP. You'd have to secure a partner that has to deliver this, whether it's with Rise or with your own partnership. But the idea is you're going to be some of the early adopters. You're going to work out all the maturity through the product. You're also going to have newer resources that are also going to be gaining or developing the experience on your project. there's going to be a significant disruption to your organization because you're pulling out the heartthrob of your business and you're replacing that with a new version of that, which is going to require you to relook at processes, relook at all your customizations. So it's a significant impact you would take to do that. Therefore, most customers that have actually made the decision have not made that decision. What they have made is they've taken the more second one, which is the tactical adoption approach, sort of similar to the brownfield example that I gave you there, chose some product of the SAP space that they believe would be a good test bed for the implementation and the move. In other words, less risk, less impact. And, maybe some areas that they're having some challenges with support, maybe those areas are some that we'll consider, like BW, like CRM, or any of the different products like that, and taking those choices to move forward with that first. And essentially trying to minimize the overall risk, and also while doing that, putting your foot across the line, getting it wet, feeling what it's like, starting to mature the organization for the larger part of the implementation. The next step, point down here is, at least 70% of the SAP customer bases is sitting right now and waiting. They're waiting this out. They've seen how the data has been moving, and they understand that it will continue to move. They haven't even got to a point where they can say in 2023 or 2024, we're going to make a massive shift in all of our ECC environment. What they have said, we'll look at it in those years. But the point is, they're sitting back, they're paying their 22%, they're getting very little support from SAP for their 22%, and they're still trying to navigate what is going to be the next step and how can they get into that position or fund that project to do that. The next option to me is probably one of the most reasonable and most valid reference options is third-party support. Many of the customers that actually come to us for this reason, because they've gone through all the other options, they've thought about all the other options, and they believe right now it's time to take a little bit of a vacation from the SAP strategy and the SI strategy, and sort of just lock down your costs, get better support, work on the other initiatives that are important to the business, like projects and implementations, cloud solution, digital transformation, all those type of things they may be considering. They want to get through that, and then they'll relook at their SAP strategy in future. We have seen customers that have moved off the SAP platform into other platforms or some pieces of the platform. But what we've seen mostly is companies that just at this point want something more for what they pay, and they want to make a decision at a later point. So what is our recommendation? Our recommendation is basically what everybody should be telling you. Essentially, take your time. Do not feel pressured to make decisions. First of all, choose value versus fear. And I think this is important for everybody, and I think most leaders understand this. At the end of the day, when you choose a project, you have to make a business case, and it has to be valuable to the organization, and it has to make sense in terms of every other thing that's going on out there. And essentially, choose that. However, the pressure does become somewhat intense, and the pressure can come to you from many different ways. You just have to make sure that you're always following what's important to your business. Be wary, and what this is really meant to sort of talk to is the idea is SAP would look for ways to see if they can lock you in right now. In other words, move to HANA database. If you want you on a HANA database, essentially they've removed the database option out there. The next logical step for you is to move to S4. So there's opportunities that you may be getting that may sound really great at this point in time, but be careful because those could be more of a lock-in strategy for the future, for your decision into the future. If you made one of those choices, you would be considered one of those customers that have already made the leap of faith and are not a part of the 70% anymore, and are now part of a customer base that is going to follow the SAP strategy. Don't fold to pressure. I don't think I need to speak much about it. We've spoken about it in this one. But pressure to make the move where there's no business case is really not a really good business decision. Take your time. As you know, we have 5 years now. I can tell you, if some of the largest organizations in the world that are running on SAP, it would take them 5 to 10 years anyway. So know that the maintenance end date will continuously move down the path. The question you have to ask SAP is, if you can prove a business case for me that significantly reduces my overall cost and increases my business value, then I may be able to make a justification to our organization that this would be a project that we'd want to undertake. So this is very good point to be at now. Now you've got a lot of data and a lot of information. The question is, what about third-party support? What would it look like and what would it mean to you? Well, third-party support in my mind says you take a break, get out of the rat race, get away from being forced to make decisions that really don't have the business value to support them. Take a break from that. Take a breather. Realize that you're paying a certain amount of money. You want to reduce that money. You want to reduce what you're paying, and you want more value for that. So, ease up on your cost, your expenses. Reduce that. Increase the business value and the support that we provide you. Take time to revitalize and regroup. Look at what happens in the market. Get a good sense of what your future of your SAP portfolio is. Some companies are minimizing or reducing that, changing, getting a best in breed, basically making selective choices. What's important to them, as an idea, CRM, Salesforce is really winning in the CRM world. Similarly, Workday is making massive headway in the HR space as well. And once you get through all of that in the next 3, 4, 5 years, then you start to make a decision on terms of what your roadmap going to look like, and then you can start putting a strategy together. Alternatively, you could save enough money through the cycle over the next 4 or 5 years that would help fund that project, so it would make it easier for you to get the funding on that side. Get real support. Make sure that at the end of the day, if you're going to pay for some support, you want to get real support. You don't want to pay 22% and know that the support you're getting is self-help. It must be, you have to do a support back or you have to upgrade to that. That is not considered support. That is considered forced upgrades to solve the issue. Come to Spinnaker. We will never do that to you. We'll also support your system as long as you need. Choose Spinnaker Support as the premium vendor to help you through this process. So what about third-party support? It may be a new concept to you. It may be something you just heard about. Gartner follows us. They have analysts that follow third-party support. If you subscribe to Gartner, you can absolutely go ask them about third-party support, ask them about companies, ask them in terms of what is going to look like for you long-term. What do you get, what you don't get, what do you lose in terms of in the cycle? But Gartner's watched this and they know that this is important because it's a very important time for the whole SAP customer base. So the important from this is Gartner predicts that it would be about $1 billion in 2023. They have seen significant amount of requests coming from customers in terms of, can we look at third-party support? Who should we look at? And having discussions around it. So it is a highly matured business model. It's been around on the SAP space for well over 14 years. Many hundreds of customers have made these choices to move to third-party support. So you would not be the first. You'd be able to speak to those customers through the cycle, and you'll understand how they get value out of it and what it would mean to you. So what does Spinnaker Support do? Who do we serve? What do we deliver? What does it look like from that perspective? Well, we have 1,300 estimated customers at 64 countries in different industries and in different countries. Industries range from banking, insurance, to highly regulated environments, manufacturing, and so forth. So there's no specific industry that this applies to. It seems to be the same for all industries. Essentially, yes, there may be a concern about security and all those protocols, but we're able to lead the customers through that to understand what they're going to be getting and how it fits within those protocols. It's also not limited to a specific country. We see it from everywhere in the world. Essentially, all companies are having challenges about how much money they spend and what they get and are they going to make the move. Of course, those countries that are battling financially and where do you see more often of it. But the reality is it impacts all SAP customers in any country. What do we deliver? Well, we do deliver third-party support, and I spoke about it briefly, and I'm going to cover a few additional slides here in a few minutes. But we consider ourselves a full-service house. In other words, we provide third-party support. We can provide the managed services for the critical applications. We can provide the transformation as you look at infrastructure to the cloud or database migrations or things like that. These are things that Spinnaker can do. We also provide the security to make sure that the environment is secure and keeping you up and running and keeping your environment safe and that. So we as a company provide third-party support, the managed service layer, and the consulting service layer, which means you have one company that can actually do it end-to-end for you. We've been established since 2008. Our Gartner Peer Insight Review is 4.9 out of a 5, which is significant high. These are customers that have spoken on our behalf to Gartner. Our Net Promoter Score is 62. Customers that are actually willing to provide a reference for us, 97% of them are willing to do that. We ISO certified, ISO 9001, ISO 27001, which means our processes are also managed and controlled and audited throughout the cycle. What do we do under third-party support? These first 5 bubbles in blue are really what third-party supporting covers, and what it includes. The break fix there is really you have a problem, something breaks, you open a ticket with us, we fix that. That includes whether it's interoperability with another third-party product, or whether it's integration within the technology, or whether some process is failing or degrading over time. Whether it's custom code, Z code as it's referred to in SAP, all of that would be supported under our support and third-party support. Tax and regulatory, very important. We make sure that we understand the scope of your environment. We understand what scope of that needs to be updated from a regulatory perspective based on the modules you have implemented and the locations that you're running. We also provide a higher level of regulatory updates to you as a customer that says based on your industry and where you have operations, that there may be regulatory things that impact you as a business, but not necessarily as a system, which means it gives you good insights about things that are coming your way, the things that you should pay attention to. We have experts that can help you through that and understand that. We see that many customers find that extremely relevant and find that as very valuable in terms of understanding what's important to them. The next one there is really, as we go through this, we assign a dedicated team to support you, which means you have named people. They work during the business hours. These are high level of expertise. These are not a triage organization. They create relationships through the meetings, through the tickets, through their review meetings, and they become part of your team for the life of your contract, which also means you can leverage them as you have just questions about your SAP portfolio. In other words, you're thinking this, or you've got a new business coming, or you want to do archiving, or you're actually thinking of changing functionality. These folks are available there to help you navigate through that and answer any of the questions that you may ask. We have a 7-point security or layered security practice, which really means we look at threats to you as a company, and we obviously provide a insight to anything that could impact your whole enterprise, but at the same time, what impacts your SAP system. And by doing so, we're able to not just reactively fix the problem, we proactively giving you the information in advance and telling you that these issues on the security side could impact your firewall, your network, or other enterprise apps as well. And we give you recommendations how to solve that very quick, which also means you have access to these folks if you have a security concern, which means they can give you good expertise through any of the issues you may be dealing with. We have other alternatives that go a bit further, like virtual patching, or you're looking for a company to come and help you harden your whole environment. Well, we have those services. They're outside of third-party support, but they are ad hoc services that can be added in. And then lastly, as you, that customer standing at that crossroads, you're probably asking the question, what is the future of your portfolio? What is the future of infrastructure? Or you maybe have concerns or thinking about something, but you're not sure. Well, we can provide an independent help on that, which means we're not an SI, we're not working in the interest of the OEM, we're working in the interest of you as a customer, and we can provide you some strong insights to that. And then lastly, we do manage services, as I mentioned, all the Oracle and the SAP suite, of course, Salesforce. We continue to expand into other products, and we will continue to as a company, but we're becoming a full service business, running third-party support, managed service for technical capabilities, strong technical capabilities, and then moving into the consulting and in terms of the transformation as well. So what makes our services different? We're very personal, and I spoke about this, the fact that we assign a dedicated team and that team is with you for the life of the contract. We make it a personal relationship between our support folks and your support folks. In other words, people that are just sitting on the opposite side of the desk helping you through your issues, not going through a triage of type of things, no self-service type support behind that, making sure that you feel a connection as you're part of the support. Responsive. P1s and P2s 24/7, 5 minutes response is our general response average. We have an SLA of 15 minutes for that, but our folks are there, they're sitting waiting for your tickets. When they receive them, they address them immediately, they pick them up and get you up and running immediately. So the idea here is high-level response, knowing that if you open a ticket any time of the day, someone will pick it up and run with it straight away. Proactive, very important. We want you to feel that the service is something that we managing, that we have control of, and that you have the information you require on a daily basis to know what's going on in there. So if there's any escalations, our team is escalating it. If there's reporting, full transparent reporting about what we do and how we provided support for you, all of that's covered. We do monthly fully transparent SLA reports, everything from response, resolution, survey, feedback on the tickets, all of that's visible to you. We have meetings to review those on a monthly basis. If there's a lot of support gone, there'll probably be shorter, more often meetings like every 2 weeks or so. Secure, I did speak about the security side, the multi-layered environment and what we offer there. That can be covered in more detail if you feel you need to have a further discussion on that. Accountability is very important. We let you select the priority level and we work according to that. We make sure that whatever you tell us it's important to you, you're the person that knows that's best. We'll work it and get it solved for you based on that. The engineers on the ground do not actually ask you any questions about that. All they'll do is they'll start the work and they'll just move on with it and make sure they get covered. Secondly, we do have a support guarantee, which basically says we guarantee our support for you as an organization. And there's a whole lot of information on our website that you can read about it. But we're one of the only that actually does that, which says we're very good at what we do. We know that and we're responsible for it. And we want to give you the guarantee to make sure that you receive that. So why is Spinnaker Support? Why Spinnaker Support is trusted by many companies, world most respected and recognized brands. So we have many companies we can put on display. We have many companies that we can give up for references through the cycle, and they'll talk to us. Firstly, our pricing is based on what you're leveraging and what you're using and what we expect the support to look like for you. So it's not just a 50% or it's not a 22%, but essentially it's the idea that we'll look through that and we'll give you the best price out there. We're built for issue resolution. The idea of third-party support, it's not like managed services. You're not agreeing to a bucket of hours in this. What you are agreeing to is someone can pick it up and can be highly expert and solve the issue in a matter of minutes. It's not about how long it takes to do it. It's about how fast you can have that done. And so our company, from a third-party support perspective, is built on the idea that we can respond and solve things within minutes. So the idea is we know it's important to you, we'll get it done, and we've got the organization in place to do that. Improved security stack. This goes far beyond what you get from the OEM. It's not reactive, it's proactive. It's actually more in depth in terms of how it can impact your enterprise. And essentially you have a set of experts that you can speak to, and you don't have to go through a triage organization. Full support of product lifecycle. Basically, as you think of ECC today, you think of S4 on-premise tomorrow, and whether you move to a cloud solution, Spinnaker will be there through that life cycle of that. We also don't force you to sunset a product, which means if you're on a version right now, we'll actually go with supporting with that version for 20 plus years as you require. And then, of course, we conveniently have the additional services that we know that our customers want, and we can provide through this as well. So let Spinnaker Support be your trusted provider for SAP services, support services. We have expert resources. We have services that's very high value, important to you for your critical systems. Globally, 24/7, lifetime support, access to our engineers at all levels from a support perspective. So again, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and I really appreciate it. There is one more slide at the end here that talks about all the references of the charts and the graphs that I presented through this exercise, but feel free to reach out to us at any time if you feel like you want to take this one step further and have a discussion with Spinnaker.